the research shows that most people around the world actually still use it, not as a medicine or as any medicinal property, but they like it for taste, you know. So when's the last time you had a manuka honey on toast, Alexia?
Oh, it was on special at Pack and Save a few weeks ago, so I've just finished the last of it. Sorry, I'll get you some for Christmas.
Yes, can you please? Yeah. 5 away from 5. You're on the panel. Matt Nippert and Alexia Russell with me this afternoon. Just a little bit about this. To the big issue of the day, do you clap when a plane has safely landed or not? It used to be commonplace. On board planes, there was a round of applause once the aircraft touched down, and everyone cheered the pilot for a job well done. Apparently now, anyone clapping on touchdown is a social pariah. When did this become a thing? Any thoughts on the panel on whether to clap or not to clap? Do either of you give the pilot a round of applause when the plane touches down? Matt, so for example, you're heading into Wellington Airport from Auckland. The plane lands.
If the weather is terrible and you are fearful of your life, I think it's quite natural that if a successful landing is pulled off without any deaths, then I think it's worth a clap, saying thanks for not imprisoning me in a burning hulk.
And Wellington is the right place to do that.
Wellington's along that. I do recall this being written about in the past, and it was particularly common in Israel landing. And I think obviously they have a different set of worries, but again, everyone's happy to be alive, I think. But
happy to be alive.
As a matter of course, just for them doing their job and landing in perfect conditions. No, I don't think it's necessary, but. Are you
willing to break the mould next time you go on a plane to New Plymouth, say, or to Dunedin, and it's a plane full of sober, sombre Kiwis, and here Matt Nippert goes.
Well, maybe when I'm leaving the provinces, I'll be clapping.
Okay, all right.
Text machine blowing up.
I am a city boy, but
the text machine is overloaded already because of Matt Nippert. Okay, so what about yourself? It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, are you surprised the venom that happens here? I mean, someone says, imagine meeting the love of your life and then finding out that they clap on planes.
It's really good that we've got nothing else to worry about, isn't it? But I'm not a person who claps on the planes, but I will say thank you to the person manning the door as I step off the vehicle. Like you say, thanks to the bus driver. I don't think clapping's necessary, but I wouldn't send anyone to sort of social ostracise them just because of this one foible.
But would you try? Because it's such a wonderful, that notion of being happy to be alive. And I think that sometimes as Kiwis, when we don't take that into account. Well, would you be the first person?
We don't even clap it when we win at the rugby. So I'm shocked that anyone would clap at planes in New Zealand.
I've got to say, my little story on this is actually going to Wellington Airport many years ago, and the captain had to go around 5 times. It was getting a bit worrying, and then everyone cheered and clapped, and that was an example.
You could do a slow, sarcastic hand clap. Maybe.
You could slow clap them,
yeah. About time.
When you're stuck on the tarmac.
Someone says, Roger says, not on New Zealand planes, only in America. They clap on planes in the US. And the Booker Prize winner, Craig says, The Vintner's Luck by Elizabeth Knox is my pick. And regarding the luminaries, a lot of people say that I don't know where you guys have been, but the Luminaries has already been made into a TV show filmed here. It must be due out next year, says James, and I absolutely look forward to that. You've been wonderful this afternoon. Matt Nippert and Alexia Russell, thank you very much for being with us on the panel. I'm with you from 1 o'clock tomorrow with Afternoons and the panel. See you then.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haereaki nei, Minister Tracy Martin looks set to test her powers over the Royal Commission of Inquiry into Abuse after it's revealed a child rapist was allowed to mix with abuse survivors without them knowing. One of those survivors says it's re-victimised people and heads have to roll. He names exactly which ones. And a sophisticated phone scam spreads with victims fleeced of millions and 3 men on the run. Jacinda Ardern talks gun control with the US President Donald Trump. School deciles are out and an equity index is in.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leata tēnei. The leadership of the Royal Commission of Inquiry into Abuse and Care is in doubt, with the Minister in charge now seeking legal advice. It emerged this morning that a convicted paedophile was allowed to be involved in some Commission meetings. The Commission admits it made mistakes over the involvement of the sex offender, who is the partner of one of the survivors' advisory group members. The Minister of Internal Affairs, Tracy Martin, says she doesn't have confidence in the Commission's leadership.
I'm going to need to see some actions out of the other end of today. I need to get advice from the Internal Affairs, but right at this moment in time, I can't say I have confidence.
During a feisty exchange in Parliament, Tracy Martin told the House that she has no role in how the Commission operates because it is independent. She says commissioners can be removed by the Governor-General. Advisory Group member Kathleen Costa says it's sickening to know she's been in hotel rooms with a convicted paedophile. Speaking in Christchurch this afternoon after a meeting of the group was abandoned, she said she was shocked that senior Commission members had known about the man's convictions. She wants the commissioners to be accountable.
At the end of the day, this whole inquiry is about accountability, whereas the same sort of behaviour and decisions are still made today, and I'm a 56-year-old woman. A lot of us went through this when we were 7, 8, 9, 10, and there are children still going through this stuff. So if we can't get it right at this end of the scale, what does that say about the whole inquiry?
Kathleen Costas. The police say phone scammers are calling vulnerable people every day to access their computers and bank accounts. Today, police announced they had arrested 13 people in relation to a multi-million-dollar scam, which saw callers pretending to be from Spark or the police. They would ask victims to download software from a website, giving the scammers complete access to the victim's computer. The scammers are believed to have netted about $2.5 million. Detective Sergeant Kevin Blackwood says that in some instances, the scammers would call victims multiple times in a day.
These people are very convincing. You know, they don't take no for an answer. You can hang up on them and they'll ring back and they'll say, oh, why did you hang up on us? You know, you've been hacked. And a lot of people have said, no, this is a scam. And then they've still been convinced that they're being hacked.
Kevin Blackwood says in some cases the scammers pretended to be officers asking for assistance on a case. Microsoft's president says the tech sector still needs to do more in light of the Christchurch shootings. Another 31 countries and 2 international organisations have joined the Christchurch call to eliminate terrorist and violent extremist content online. Major tech companies have also announced they will join forces to set up and fund an organisation specifically focused on stopping terrorists from exploiting their websites. Brad Smith says whatever people thought was sufficient on March the 14th, it clearly wasn't sufficient the next day.
We have taken very important steps over the last 6 months, but we equally have to keep moving forward. And I think one of the things that Prime Minister Ardern has focused us all on is we're not done. We constantly have to keep coming back together with clear milestones to make real progress.
Microsoft President Brad Smith. Meanwhile, the second tranche of gun law reform will introduce a gun register and new penalties has passed its first reading in Parliament. National, ACT and Independent MP Jamie Lee Ross all voted against the bill. Despite major changes, there are still major red flags for the KiwiBuild program as outlined in a risk register. After persistent problems, KiwiBuild was overhauled and a new housing minister appointed. However, the register, released to National's Judith Collins, shows there were still 12 areas flagged as high risk. They cover resourcing, investment decisions, perceptions about funding, the procurement process and access to skilled labour. The risk report said one potential consequence is legal action and a loss in confidence from key stakeholders. In Parliament, Ms Collins asked the Minister Megan Woods if KiwiBuild was exposed to legal challenge.
Like any public entity that is spending public money, it needs to have a clearly spelt out risk register that shows what all the possibilities are and how it is that that is mitigated. This is no different than any other departmental risk register.
The Housing Minister, Megan Woods. A young woman who attended a memorial service for the late Tongan Prime Minister in Auckland last week has been diagnosed with measles. The Ministry of Health has advised its counterpart in Tonga. Health officials say everyone who was at the service for Akalisi Pohiva at the Tuinga Papai Free Wesleyan Church in Favona on September the 15th should be on the alert for symptoms of high fever, runny nose, cough and sore eyes. The medical officer of Health, William Ranger, says nearly half of the more than 1,200 cases of measles in Auckland are occurring in Pacific communities. School principals are looking forward to the end of school decile numbers by 2022 at the latest. The government is introducing an index that uses more accurate indicators of socio-economic disadvantage. Our education correspondent, John Gerritsen, reports.
The new system is based on indicators such as reliance on benefits and transience between schools. It's likely to give schools a score between 1 and 200 that will be used to allocate extra funding. It's similar to a risk index the previous government had planned to introduce and is considered more accurate than the decile, which puts schools into one of 10 groups based on the proportion of their students who live in the most disadvantaged neighbourhoods. Principals say dumping decile numbers will be a big improvement because they've been used to stigmatise schools in poor areas. Ko John Gerritsen, TNA.
It's 6 minutes past 5. Samoa aren't underestimating the task ahead of them when they kick off their Rugby World Cup in Japan tonight. They play Russia in their first game after the Russians surprised many with their competitiveness in the tournament opener on Friday against hosts Japan. While Russia eventually lost the match 30-10, Samoa coach Steve Jackson was impressed by Russia's set-piece play and kicking game. Jackson says Samoa wants to live up to the standard of the Samoa teams of the 1990s who qualified for the knockout stages of the tournament.
We said from day one that we just don't want to be involved in pool play. We want to go beyond pool play and treat every game like it's a Rugby World Cup final. As we've seen over the last few days, I think there's been quite a few teams that have been a little bit nervous. We've just told our players to get out and have some fun and enjoy themselves.
The match kicks off at 10:15. Barcelona superstar Lionel Messi and US co-captain Megan Rapinoe have been named the Men's and Women's Players of the Year at the World Football Awards in Milan. Messi has won the Men's Award for the 6th time, ahead of Liverpool defender Virgil van Dijk and Juventus forward Cristiano Ronaldo. Rapinoe received the Women's Play Award after helping guide the USA to its second straight World Cup. That's the news.
A busy day in New York.
There is a cost to everything, but the biggest cost is doing nothing.
It's a message of urgency, one the Secretary-General himself heard when he visited the Pacific recently.
You all come to us young people for hope. How dare you? You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words.
Always busy on Morning Reports, weekdays from 6 on 101 FM, on air and online. Then on 9 to noon, American writer Billy Fleming on the confluence of design, science and politics on architects challenging climate change. And after 10, Jane Gilmore, the Australian journalist on a mission to fix the media's coverage of women. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow for Gisborne and Hawke's Bay. Occasional rain clearing from the south tonight. Few spots returning tomorrow afternoon. Upper and Wellington, cloudy periods. Possible showers today. A few showers developing tomorrow afternoon, mainly in the Upper, with possible thunderstorms there in the evening. For the remainder of the North Island, rain, heavy falls and possible thunderstorms. Snow lowering to 600 metres over the central high country tomorrow evening. For Marlborough, Canterbury, Otago, excluding Clutha, cloudy periods with isolated showers. Showers spreading north tomorrow, some heavy with hail and possible thunderstorms. Snow lowering to 300 metres in Otago and to 500 metres elsewhere. For Nelson, Westland and Bulla, dry in Nelson but scattered showers elsewhere. Showers spreading everywhere tomorrow with heavy showers, hail, possible thunderstorms and snow lowering to 500 metres. Fiordland, Southland and Clutha, showers, some heavy with hail and possible thunderstorms. Snow lowering to 100 metres later tomorrow. Chatham Islands, rain with heavy falls, easing to a few showers tomorrow. RNZ National, it's 5:09.
Thank you, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. If you're just joining us, the Minister responsible for the Royal Commission of Inquiry into Abuse in Care has refused to express confidence in its leadership, following revelations a convicted sex offender attended some of its meetings. Tracy Martin is demanding answers after news broke this morning that the partner and support person of one of the Commission's Survivor Advisory Group members is a convicted paedophile. The inquiry says it found out in May the man, who can't be named for legal reasons, had convictions, but it wasn't until August 22nd that it discovered they were for child sex abuse. It's the latest criticism levelled at how the Royal Commission has run, and as politicians weigh in, survivors are hoping it won't curtail action against abusers. Tom Furley reports.
The Honourable Simon Bridges.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Internal Affairs. Does she have confidence in the Royal Commission of Inquiry into Abuse in Care?
The Honourable Tracy Martin.
Mr Speaker, personally I have already expressed my disappointment and dismay at the information that I found out today. However, the member is asking me as the Minister for Internal Affairs and as a lawyer, he should know that the Royal Commission into Historic Abuse in State Care and in the care of the faith-based institutions is independent of government, and I have no role in its operational matters.
It was a fiery exchange lasting nearly 15 minutes in the House, with Internal Affairs Minister Tracy Martin repeatedly telling National Party leader Simon Bridges that it's an independent Royal Commission and she has no role in how it operates.
Mr Speaker, at this time I do not know if Mr Bridges ever contacted the Royal Commission of Inquiry, which would have been the most legal, the most appropriate way to ask the questions that he wants answers to. They are questions that are valid. They are questions that should be asked. But he is asking the wrong person.
When asked before heading into the House whether she had confidence in the Commission's leadership, she replied, "Not today."
I'm going to need to see some actions out of the other end of today. I need to get advice from the Internal Affairs. But right at this moment in time, I can't say I have confidence.
News that one of the group's members' partners is a convicted paedophile came to the Minister today, as it did to members of the group, many of whom only heard through the media this morning. The Commission found out in August and says it took immediate action. Since being established, the Royal Commission has been heavily criticised for how it is operating. It faced backlash after appointing a gang member to a key role, using survivors for trial or pilot interviews, and it's faced claims its chair, Anand Sachinand, fell asleep while a survivor told their story, as well as accusations commissioners shut down questions on potential conflicts of interest. Sir Anand Sachinand announced last month he's stepping down from the job. The advisory group was set to meet in Christchurch this afternoon, and while members travelled to be there, one, Jane Stevens, says it was abandoned.
Every time I've come to a meeting now, there's been some kind of scandal that has basically meant that we are unable to do the work that we have been brought together to do. And, it's becoming, stranger than fiction.
The Royal Commission is already in the process of talking to survivors. A spokesperson for the Network of Survivors of Faith-Based Abuse, Liz Tonks, says she hopes it doesn't affect their work and survivors' confidence in coming forward.
This is a distraction from the work the Royal Commission needs to do, to having as many people come forward as possible to their private hearings so we have the information that they can act on and make the appropriate recommendations to get change. Otherwise, this is not going to stop. So we just hope it's not a distraction from that and it doesn't become a political football to undermine the Commission.
Liz Tonks says she's found the process for survivors' private hearings has been safe so far, and the Commission needs to provide reassurance. Meanwhile, the Minister, Tracy Martin, says the inquiry is the most complicated Royal Commission in New Zealand's history. The only person that can remove a commissioner from the inquiry is the Governor-General, and the Minister says she's seeking legal advice. For Checkpoint, Tom Furley.
Minister Tracy Martin says she's meeting with Commission members tomorrow, and in the meantime she has sought urgent advice on what powers she has.
I have been provided with the section of the law around should a commissioner need to be removed and what the law says about that. I'm still waiting on advice around my role. And if any, should that be the case, should we need to move down that pathway? But at the end of the day, the Governor-General is the only person who can remove a commissioner from the Royal Commission of Inquiry. And the other thing that has happened is that the Royal Commission has been in contact with my officers today and has asked to meet with me, so we are moving forward to set up that appointment.
Do you think the Commissioner needs to go?
It wouldn't be constructive for me to say what I thought about that, to be perfectly frank. At this stage, I only have what is reported in the media. So I'm very much looking forward to meeting with the Royal Commission, having them explain to me, and they've offered to do that. Let's remember they don't have to. So I'm very much looking forward to meeting with them and hearing from them in the first person. How did this come about? How could this be avoided? And how can they rebuild or regain or rework the trust that their survivor community needs to make the Royal Commission of Inquiry a success?
But you wouldn't be investigating your powers if you weren't investigating whether you needed to exercise them, would you?
I want to be fully informed. So I like to be fully informed, and I know what the law is, but I don't know my role in it. So I want to make sure that I know what my role is, so that if there is a place where action needs to be taken by the Governor-General, and at this stage I have a cursory understanding that I can only recommend after it's gone through Cabinet, I want to make sure I'm fully informed around that as this this continues to evolve.
So, will you meet with the Commission and then make a recommendation to Cabinet?
I will meet with the Commission and have a face-to-face conversation with them about how did this happen, how could this have been avoided, are some of the other statements inside the media correct, which cause concern. I think there's a question that's been raised in the media around police vetting. So I want to hear from them in the first person, seeing as they've offered to make themselves, to meet with me. But that doesn't mean that I will then be taking next steps. The law sets a very high threshold for the Governor-General to take any action. So I can't say what my next steps will be until I meet with the Commission.
Would you have expected vetting of the victim advisory group?
Well, and I do understand, actually, the Commissioner who has said that one of the reasons they didn't vet the Victims Advisory Group was because many victims, after incredibly traumatic lives, did go on and have a criminal record. So I do understand that. I think in hindsight, and again, I'm not part of the operational, in hindsight, there are obviously certain crimes it might have been very smart to screen people for. But I also want to make this clear. The person in question is not a member of the survivor panel. So they are not a member of the actual panel. They are a support person to a member of the panel. So I guess what would have been, this is the bit that I need to go through with the Commission. How far out did they think about? What police vetting did they do? And how far back did they think they should go, considering people were going to be in contact with each other?
What level of confidence do you have in the Commission right now?
I'd have to say right now my confidence is very shaken.
How badly so?
I'm very much looking forward to meeting with them face to face.
And when is that going to happen?
My understanding is we're trying to get that together for tomorrow.
So on a scale of 1 to 10, Minister, 10 being complete confidence and, 0, none, where are you on this scale?
At the moment, I'm around about a 5. I'm teetering.
And what's making you teeter? Specifically?
I need to know from them. I need to hear from them specifically, rather than rely on media reports and Simon Bridges' tweets. I need to hear from them specifically. How did this come about? What actions did they take? How are they going to rebuild confidence? I need to hear from them specifically.
What would make you go to the Governor-General, go to Cabinet first and go to the Governor-General and say, I think the Commissioner needs to be removed? What is it that you would hear?
Yeah.
There's only three reasons that the Governor-General can remove an individual commissioner. So the law states that the Governor-General can remove an individual commissioner due to 1, misconduct, 2, if they were unable to perform the functions of their office, or 3, if they had neglected their duty. Now, that's the other piece of advice that's part of the advice I'm asking for Internal Affairs to give to me. What are the thresholds around that? I need to have the conversation with the Royal Commission, and then I need to match those conversations and information from them up against the thresholds that Internal Affairs is going to present. And then I'm going to have to look at both of those things and see whether we have a situation that I might need to move forward on.
Would it be fair to say the area of focus in those 3 things that you've just listed is potentially neglect of duty?
I think if only based on the media reports that I have seen, I would suggest that of the 3 reasons that a commissioner could be removed, that would be the one I think would be the closest to a fit. But again, I haven't spoken directly to the commissioners.
Is it the surprise factor here that is concerning you, that you don't find out until you hear it on the news media about what's going on? Or can you not have a victim advisor in a group where they have a partner or a close associate who's committed a serious sexual assault?
With regard to the surprise factor, the Royal Commission, the Independent Royal Commission of Inquiry, is not required to tell me anything. So it's a surprise factor because I'm as shocked and upset for the survivors as I think most people are. So that's what that response is. With regard to the second part of your question, I need to hear from the commissioners. What was their thought process here? What were the actual actions they took? Because standing here on the outside, I don't think my view is that different from most of the people that have been reported in the media.
Okay, I'm still not clear on that, Minister, in the sense, is it possible for a person to be on the victim advisory group and have a partner who's committed a serious sexual assault as long as measures are taken to keep that person away from the advisory group?
Well, if a victim is a victim and they have a partner who is, so they're on the survivors advisory panel, and let's say they have a husband who has been convicted of a serious offence and is now been released by the justice system but with conditions applied, and that husband comes nowhere near the inquiry and other people, I don't know that we could make that condition on that survivor, that survivor themselves can no longer be listened to or can no longer participate because of who they married. I'm not confident that that's something we should be saying. What we're talking about here is basically who knew what and when, and why did they think it was appropriate, if they did, that person was close to people who had suffered such trauma.
And that's Tracy Martin, who's the Minister responsible for the Royal Commission of Inquiry. After 6, we hear from a survivor who was unknowingly in meetings with the convicted child sex offender. And he says someone has to go for trust to be restored in the inquiry. It's almost 23 after 5. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Let us know what you think of all of this. Should someone whose partner is a paedophile be allowed on the survivors advisory group? How far should police vetting go, and do any of the leadership in this inquiry need to go to restore faith? You can text us on 2101, you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. The Christchurch mosque attacks have been front and centre of what's been a jam-packed day for the Prime Minister at the United Nations. Jacinda Ardern talked gun control with the US President Donald Trump in their first official sit-down and announced the sign-up of dozens of new countries in the Christchurch call. Our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch, is in New York.
An official sit-down with America's most powerful man and a presidential thumbs up from Donald Trump.
I have to say I don't tend to do photos with thumbs ups as a general rule of thumb, but it was a positive and constructive meeting.
Jacinda Ardern speaking after her first formal talks with the US President near the United Nations HQ. Media were barred from attending the top of the meeting, with just a few photos of the encounter publicly released. Not much detail on most of the discussion either, with just one big revelation. Mr. Trump, unprompted, inquired about New Zealand's gun buyback.
I sensed an interest. I mean, obviously, we were able to move very quickly and with consensus. I think that obviously stood out to the world.
And to Mr. Trump too. A curious question given the United States' pervasive pro-gun culture and the president's historically fluid position on firearms.
I certainly wouldn't want to predetermine that means anything particular for the United States other than an interest in what we did.
Among the other topics of conversation, the prospect for a free trade deal, tourism and, yes, Kiwi golfing legend Sir Bob Charles. But one big subject not on the agenda was the Christchurch call, with the US still holding out from joining the pledge to eliminate terrorist content online.
Regardless of whether or not they've formally signed up or not, actually we've had a really good level of participation and support from the US.
The Christchurch call also a major focus for Ms Ardern at the UN today, hosting a special meeting with government leaders and tech executives to report progress since its debut in May. And while the US hasn't jumped on board, 31 other countries have, bringing the total number of nations to 48. In another high-profile sit-down, Ms Ardern met the leader of one of the call's founding signatories, the UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson.
Thank you very much for coming.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Absolutely wonderful.
Mr Johnson's recent ascension means he wasn't the one who signed the paper in May, but he reaffirmed the country's commitment. The social media giants also showing up in force, with top bosses attending, including those from Microsoft, Twitter, YouTube and Facebook.
This was a horrific attack, and the fact that the online tools which we build to bring people together were used to spread violent extremism is something that is horrible for all of us.
Not quite an apology from Facebook's 2IC Sheryl Sandberg, but an expression of regret and an admission the online platforms need to improve.
We can't wait until a moment like this happens again. We have to do the hard work now to establish the systems and the protocols and the cooperation, and that's what today is about.
The tech companies announcing a set of clear guidelines on what to do and who to contact in the event of another attack like in Christchurch. The group also unveiling plans to set up an independent organisation with its own dedicated staff and executive director, specifically focused on the pledge's aims. The Prime Minister calls it a substantial and meaningful commitment.
So far, the engagement has been excellent.
The opposition had dismissed the call as a feel-good PR exercise. Ms Ardern will be hoping today's announcements done enough to put that to rest. From New York for Checkpoint, Craig McCulloch.
And sticking in New York, Swedish campaigner Greta Thunberg has made a passionate speech to world leaders at the UN, accusing them of failing to act on climate change. "You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words," she told a UN climate summit in New York. About 60 world leaders were taking part in the one-day meeting organised by UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres. The BBC's Nick Bryant was there.
A sweltering September scorch here in New York City. Not much sign of autumn here. And it hasn't just been a long summer, but north of the equator, the hottest ever on record. So today at the Riverside headquarters of the United Nations, an urgent climate action summit. This global body once more sounding the alarm. The world is losing the race against climate change. In this air-conditioned auditorium, the heat came from the 16-year-old Swedish activist Greta Thunberg. The UN hoping to harness what's being called the Greta effect, her ability to mobilise the young and to shame the old. And my, how she did that today.
This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you? You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words. You are failing us. But the young people are starting to understand your betrayal. The eyes of all future generations are upon you. And if you choose to fail us, I say we will never forgive you.
For the grown-ups in the room, it was awkward. Was there applause? A form of apology.
Mr. President, welcome to
the world's most powerful adult only briefly stopped by. Greta Thunberg watched from the side, scowling as he arrived. He didn't address the summit himself. He's withdrawing America from the Paris Climate Change Accord. And soon he took the chair at a rival event organised by the White House on religious persecution. Other international leaders have come here with new pledges to curb emissions. Only nations with aggressive plans were allowed to speak. But even those commitments won't be enough to keep temperatures from rising to dangerous levels.
Thank you so much.
But every world leader today was completely upstaged by a teenager with a furious speech that will echo down the generations.
Nick Bryant there reporting from the UN in New York. Coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, phone scammers fleece victims of millions and police name and shame 3 men who are on the run. The school decile system is being dumped for an equity index. So how's that any different? And Kaka go gaga when they're let loose in the Able Tasman. We'd love to hear from you about anything you've heard on the programme today. Do you still have faith in the Royal Commission of Inquiry into Abuse in Care? You can get in touch, text us on 2101, you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Let's go to the headlines now with Susanna.
There are doubts about the leadership of the Royal Commission of Inquiry into Abuse in Care, with the minister in charge now seeking legal advice. This morning it was revealed that a convicted paedophile was allowed to be present in some commission meetings. The minister, Tracy Martin, says she has no confidence in the leadership and says commissioners can be removed by the Governor-General. Microsoft President Brad Smith says the tech sector still needs to do more following the mosque shootings in Christchurch. Another 31 countries and 2 international organisations have joined the Christchurch call to eliminate terrorist and violent extremist content online. And major tech companies will jointly establish an organisation to focus on stopping terrorists from exploiting websites. The new Minister for KiwiBuild, Megan Woods, says the risk register raised by Nationals Judith Collins in Parliament this afternoon is standard practice for a department spending public money. The register outlines 12 areas flagged as high risk, including resourcing, the procurement process and access to skilled labour, and a potential for legal action. School principals are welcoming the planned end of school decile numbers by 2022, saying they've been used to stigmatise schools in poor areas. The government is bringing in an index using more accurate indicators of socioeconomic disadvantage to allocate funding. It also wants to increase the $150 million a year it spends on equity funding for schools each year. The police say phone scammers have been calling some people every day to access their computers and bank accounts. As part of Operation Deadwood, they have announced the arrest of 13 people in relation to a multi-million-dollar scam in which scammers pretended to be from Spark or the police to get access to victims' computers. The only road into Milford Sound has been closed as the region prepares for snow overnight. The Transport Agency expects it to reopen mid to late morning tomorrow once the snow has cleared. Those are the latest news headlines from RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thank you, Susanna. This is Checkpoint, and if you're just tuning in, your timing is impeccable. It's time for the business news with Madison Reedy. Hi, Maddie. So,
Hello.
Tower Insurance, number of big announcements today. What have they got going?
Yeah, so first off, Tower Insurance, which is the listed insurer, has today announced that they're actually looking to acquire Yui Insurance for a price of $13 million. Now, Yui, you may have heard of it. It has 34,000 policyholders in this country. It's actually a South African-owned business, but its subsidiary in this country sells mostly car insurance as well as some house and contents insurance too. Now, under this proposed deal, Yui's policyholders will keep their policies until they expire, and then they will be offered Tower policies instead. Now, we know that Tower's policies are priced based on risk. Now, this deal is obviously subject to regulatory approval from the insurance regulator, the Reserve Bank of New Zealand, but Tower says that it is confident that it'll get the green light from the Reserve Bank by the end of this calendar year, even though it hasn't actually filed a formal application to go ahead with this deal. Now, in its discussions with the Reserve Bank, Tower Insurance spoke about a number of things. One thing that actually did come up in these discussions were Tower's capital requirements. Now, we talk about this quite a lot in business. Essentially, what this is the safety net that insurers and also banks have to hold on to in their back pocket in the case of a large crisis or incident, which would cause them to pay out a large number of claims. Now, this acquisition of Yui or proposed acquisition means that Tower would obviously have to increase its capital requirements because it will have more policies on its books, therefore will need a larger safety net. But interestingly, also, the Reserve Bank used this time to also tell Tower Insurance that it needs to remove a $53.1 million receivable, which is money that it's waiting to be paid, from its solvency capital measurements. Now, that's a payment that it's waiting on the Earthquake Commission to pay it. Now, it relates to payments that Tower made to residents impacted by the Canterbury earthquakes in 2011 and 2012. Now, Tower made payouts to these people based on the fact, to repair their homes and also the foundation, the land that their homes were on following the quakes. Now, they paid that out on the basis under this industry-wide agreement with the Earthquake Commission that they would later be reimbursed by the Earthquake Commission because these payments were being made on behalf of them. It was just the quickest way to do it. Now, the Tower Insurance has actually entered into a dispute resolution process with the Earthquake Commission over this disputed payment. And in fact, they've actually today threatened legal action, saying that this will probably play out in the courts. So because the delay, that will probably cause a delay of this payment, the Reserve Bank has said, hold on guys, you're actually going to need to take this off your solvency capital requirements, because if you go through the courts, it might take up to 4 years for you to see any money. Now, that has resulted in a licence change for Tower Insurance and increased their capital requirements. So it's having to raise $47.2 million on the stock exchange to fund that. Now, I spoke with Tower's Chief Executive, Richard Harding, earlier today. Now, he says all the while that this is going on, meanwhile, Tower is actually still getting claims from the EQC that are called overcap claims that are over $100,000 for so-called shoddy repair work following the Canterbury quakes. Now, he says that Tower has accepted some, in fact 45 of those in the past year, but it is actually pushing back really heavily on others, and he says that's because it's unacceptable that it is getting these claims still from the EQC when it's not even liable to pay them.
Look, I think the disappointment with that is that, again, we're being faced with a place where the EQC needs to take accountability for its own liability. Here we have damaged properties that are results of either negligence on behalf of the repairer or where they've been mis-scoped or identified in the first place by the EQC assessing process. And in those cases, we are just saying to the EQC, no more. That is not our accountability. Our policyholders and shareholders shouldn't have to pay for that. If you think about this in terms of costs, all of these costs go somewhere. They either go to Tower shareholders or we have to increase premiums to pay for it, right? That's the only two places that costs within a company can go. It's not appropriate that either of those parties bear the cost of the EQC. So we are pushing back very heavily to make sure that only those claims that we are truly liable for come to Tower and where we deal with our customers. A lot of the claims, about 75% of the claims that we receive from EQC at the moment, we push back and refuse to deal with it with the EQC.
That's the Chief Executive of Tower Insurance, Richard Harding.
And a tiny little bit of my heart dies when I hear, Madison, that a shoe company has gone into voluntary administration.
You and I both, Lisa. So this afternoon, Sierra Shoes has unfortunately gone into voluntary administration. It's also known to some people as the Cumps brand. Now, it was actually founded in 1946 and it has 122 stores in New Zealand with 140 staff here, a similar amount of stores and staff in Australia too. Administrators from McGrath-Nicol have been appointed today to its operations on both sides of the Tasman. Now, they've said today that its downfall was ultimately the fact that it was too slow to catch up with the changing retail trends, being online shopping and the like, and they say that they are going to keep its stores operating for the time being while they hunt for a buyer for either part or all of the business.
What else has been happening on the markets? Let's take a twirl around there.
The NZX Top 50 Index has closed down just 0.1% tonight. That's a fall of 15 points to close at 10,858. The New Zealand dollar, that's buying at just under 63 US cents, 92.9 to the Australian and 50.7 British pence.
Thanks, Maddie. Madison Reedy with business there. For the second time in 2 years, the government has announced the demise of the much maligned school decile system. The Education Minister, Chris Hipkins, wants to replace the 1 to 10 decile number by 2022 with an index based on risk factors like children's parents' income. Many schools had hoped that would have happened by now because the previous government promised a similar change by this year or next. Here's our education correspondent, John Gerritsen.
The new index will be based on factors such as whether a child's parents are on a benefit, their mother's age when the child was born, and how often the child has changed schools. By contrast, the decile system is based on factors in a child's neighbourhood that might or might not apply to them personally. The Education Minister, Chris Hipkins, says it makes sense to use a system that more accurately predicts whether children are at risk of failure.
We know that deciles are a very blunt way of targeting school funding. We know that we've got better information about how to identify where the most disadvantaged students are, and it seems crazy not to use that better information. So it is going to take us a little while. It's not going to happen overnight, but I think deciles will be a thing of the past within the next few years.
A major criticism of the decile is that it gives schools a number from 1 to 10, depending on what percentage of their enrolments come from the most deprived neighbourhoods. Those numbers are often misunderstood as an indicator of school quality, and Chris Hipkins says the new system will still use numbers to indicate the scale of need at each school, but it will be a lot harder to use them as a way of judging schools.
Most likely is that the schools will get a score each year, and it'll be each year, and that'll determine how much operating funding they get, and that score might be anything between 1 to 200, and it will change regularly. So you won't get that long-lasting stigmatisation that comes from a decile ranking that sticks around for 5 years.
Principal Tom Webb from Decile 1 Mangere College says getting rid of decile numbers will be a big improvement.
A lot of people feel that a decile number gives an indication of the quality of the education you receive in a school, which is clearly not the case. It's about the socioeconomic background of the students. So removing that label from schools, I think, will be a really big advantage, and particularly for low decile schools that have had that stigma placed on them in the past.
The Education Ministry currently distributes $150 million a year based on school decile ratings, and the government is promising to increase that amount when it introduces the new system. Tom Webb says that will make a big difference.
That's really important, and it's to benefit students who are in those low socioeconomic areas, communities like our own, and to provide them with the sort of resources that other schools are able to achieve.
Whetu Cormack from the Principals Federation says it's critical the new system is accurate and confidential.
Well, the challenge will be, will those young people who have the risk, will they be able to be identified? We know that children across the socioeconomic spectrum are in every decile school at the moment, and we would hope that we will be able to trust the information, the data gathering that they have, which will in turn equate to funding.
The government's reassuring schools. It says there will be strict measures to protect children's privacy. In the meantime, Whetu Cormack says most principals are looking forward to dumping the decile and moving to a new system. Mo te hōtaka o te ahiahi, ko John Gerritsen tēnei.
I'm sure you'll have some thoughts on that one. Let us know what you think. Are they just replacing one measurement with another, and will parents use that number to rule out certain schools? Let us know your thoughts. Text us on 2101 or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Police are hunting for 3 men allegedly involved in a sophisticated multi-million-dollar phone scam that's seen one person alone fleeced out of $300,000. The scammers claim to be from Sparkle, the police, and they con victims into handing over money or downloading software that allows their bank accounts to be raided remotely. More than a dozen people have already been arrested for money laundering in what's been dubbed Operation Deadwood. I asked Detective Sergeant Kevin Blackman exactly how the scam worked.
So you'll get someone who will pretend that they are calling from
predominantly Spark, however not, it could be any sort of telco or chorus or something along those lines, and they say to you, hey, someone is trying to hack into your internet, or someone is trying to hack into your bank account, or someone is trying to hack into your computer. You need to act immediately, and they predominantly send the victim a link, and they say you need to click on this link so that we can stop these people from accessing your account. And a lot of people think that's that's something that would generally happen.
So they don't actually ask you for your bank account as such. They get an email address off you and then send you this link, a dodgy link.
Yeah. So they'll get you, and this link, as soon as you click on this link, there's a whole lots of applications that can do it, but the main one is called Team Viewer. And they'll send you this link, you'll click on it, and as soon as you've clicked on it, it gives them complete access to your computer.
So then, if you are doing online banking or something similar, they work out what your passwords and things are? Is that how it works?
What they'll do is they'll say someone is trying to access your bank accounts, and so you need to go into your bank account, and we need to, do something with your bank account to stop these people actually hacking in. But these people are actually doing the hacking themselves.
Have you heard one of the conversations firsthand or a recording of it?
We have.
How convincing are they?
Oh, they're very convincing. These, we go to work every day and do our job, and we believe these people go to work every day and do their job. Their job is scamming people. So these people are very convincing. They don't take no for an answer. You can hang up on them, and they'll ring back and they'll say, "Oh, why did you hang up on us? You've been hacked." And a lot of people have said, "No, this is a scam," and then they've still been convinced that they're being hacked.
How much money are they lifting off people here?
So, we've had hundreds of people fall victim to the scams, ranging from a few thousand to nearly $300,000.
In one hit? 300 grand in one hit?
Well, a lot of these victims will get worked on for a period of time. So, for example, they'll continually call up every day, and it could take quite a while, a period of time before the victim actually realises that they're being scammed. We released a media release a few months ago where the scammers were saying that they were working with the New Zealand police, and that they were needing they were using the victims to help catch these hackers. So the people thought they were actually helping the New Zealand police, but they were being scammed themselves. That's really that's really scary for us, because the last thing we want is people not trusting the police.
So that 300 grand, although it might have been taken over time, that came from one victim, did it?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. So are these people calling from within New Zealand, or is there an offshore element to this?
Yeah, we believe it is being run offshore. However, there is definitely a New Zealand element. So the New Zealand base, we call them mules, and a mule is someone who is used to transfer the money or launder the money, and there could be a number of those in any one victim or any one transaction. So the mules in New Zealand are being used to receive the money and then transfer the money predominantly offshore.
So you're asking for help to locate 3 people. Tell us a little bit about them.
So, we've released the names of 3 people that our investigation have identified are involved in some way or another. They're not the only 3, but they are 3 that we currently have warrants to arrest for money laundering in relation to the scam.
And do you think they're still in the Auckland area?
Well, we definitely know they have been. But I wouldn't want to say that they are only in Auckland area. They do have connections throughout, predominantly the Greater North Island.
Okay, so you say 13 people arrested already. You've put these 3 names out into the public domain. How widespread do you think this is? How many more people are out there?
Well, people are getting scammed over the whole country, and we think that the people that are being used to launder the money way more than what we've arrested, put it that way. And everyone who is receiving money from these victims are putting themselves out there for charges of money laundering. So you can't just have money turn up in your account and just pretend you don't know anything about it. You are responsible for your own account. There are rules and regulations around the use of your account. You can't be giving your EFTPOS card to someone else and pretending you don't know anything about it. And if you receive money in your account and you don't notify your bank or come to the police and say, hey, look, I've just had $10,000 pop up in my account, what's the story, then you are at risk of being charged with money laundering.
And is that what is happening? Are these people using associates to launder money?
There's a range of different things. So there's associates, some of people that we're looking at have used their own accounts. So it's just there's a number of different ways that it can happen.
I see that you note that these 3 guys that you were looking for have been known to frequent the casino. Is there money laundering going on through gambling as well?
Well, unfortunately, the casino, we're working quite closely with this casino, and they've been really good. So, you can withdraw large amounts of money from the casino. So, that is one of the places that people go to withdraw cash, not necessarily to gamble with it, but to withdraw it and launder it.
So, are these 3 that you're looking for, are they New Zealand residents or citizens?
No, they're not. No, they are Indian nationals that are here on various visas. But we are working with immigration in relation to this scam as well.
And that's Detective Sergeant Kevin Blackman. Details of the 3 men that police are looking for are on the police website and Facebook page. It's about 10 minutes away from 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. We'd love to hear from you if you've had a phone call from those scammers, just to let us know how intense it is and what kind of tricks they use. Text us on 2101 or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. While the Rugby World Cup dominates headlines, it's not the only rugby tournament going on in Japan, with defence forces from around the globe taking part in their World Cup. The tournament has run simultaneous to the actual World Cup for many years, and New Zealand made it to the 3rd place playoff against France. Rugby reporter Joe Porter headed out to Kashiwa to watch the match alongside the friends and family of the Defence Blacks players.
The New Zealand military haka wowing the local Japanese crowd, with many coming just to get a glimpse of the famous challenge. It was the same at each game they played.
It was totally packed, and they went berserk when they'd voiced at the haka.
And you've just had a Japanese woman come up to you just now and ask...
Yeah, just are the New Zealand team doing the dance? She said, are they doing the dance? We're here to watch the dance.
Shane and Kelly Coburn made the journey from Tawa to support their son James, who until a few weeks ago was not a military man.
They were really short of a tight head prop, and so they rang Wellington, and Wellington put his name forward, so he had to join the Territorials to get over here. Yeah, so he had to swear his allegiance about 3 weeks before they came, and yeah.
So hopefully World War III doesn't break out anytime soon?
Exactly, that's what we said, you might end up being deployed somewhere when you're here.
Abby Rivers also made the hikoi from Aotearoa to cheer on her partner, Lua.
My partner was based down south doing a course, and they called him up a couple of days before they had a camp in Wellington, and he just rang me and said, I'm going to Japan. So then he went to Wellington for a week to find out he was in the team, and then me and my mother just booked a ticket.
And she and the Coburns revealed the Defence Blacks have picked up cult status in Japan due to a classic case of mistaken identity.
They stop at truck stops a lot on their bus, and they have to sign autographs because people think they're the All Blacks.
It's easier just to do it than trying to explain you're not.
Some people got Lua to hold a baby. They had to hold a baby and take a picture, and he was like, oh, I don't know what to do, and they just took a big picture of him holding a baby, so it was like, that was quite cool. The baby cried, so he wasn't too happy, but it was all right.
However, there is an All Black among their ranks. Former New Zealand captain Buck Shelford served in the Navy in the 70s and 80s and has played and been an ambassador for the Defence Blacks ever since.
This is the 3rd World Cup they've had. I lined up with the World Cups, but I captained the team back in 1985, the first tour they had after the Second World War. We had an 8-match tour of Britain. We went through undefeated, and it was a great tournament, great tour.
Shelford says there's always been a strong affinity between the Japanese, New Zealand and Māori.
They very much like our culture in New Zealand. They come out and they go to all the Māori areas, like down to Rotorua to Waka and all that stuff. They're really interested in the tangata whenua of New Zealand.
The Defence Blacks lost 10-5 to France in the third-place playoff, with Fiji beating the UK in the final. While disappointed in the result, assistant coach Malanga Leota says they've done New Zealand proud.
That's the whole thing. It's all about representing our country, representing our people, and who we are.
It's a small world, and New Zealand is even smaller. Turns out Leota is an uncle of Hurricanes and Manu Samoa lock Kane Laupepe, who's hooked the Defence Blacks up with tickets to tonight's Rugby World Cup clash between Samoa and Russia in Kumagaya.
Quite lucky, got the nephew that plays for the Manu, and they offer us 20 tickets for the game. So yeah, got to take the boys out there and cheer out for the blue.
With blue on the ground and black in the stands, it's hard to see Russia coming close to the Manu tonight. In Kishiwa, mō te hōtaka o te ahi, ko Joe Porter aho.
And back home, a record number of threatened kaka have today been released into the Abel Tasman National Park. 12 of the native parrots raised in captivity flew from their purpose-built aviary at Bark Bay and into the wilderness. It was a magical moment for some young environmental ambassadors who were there for the occasion, along with iwi, who blessed the moment, and the volunteers who've worked hard to make it happen. Our Nelson reporter Tracy Neal was also there.
My name is Izzy Baby Sugar Sugar, Ari Ari S.A. Dora Dora Mia 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 Slap.
Youngsters from nearby Ngāti School getting in the mood for a day out in a favourite place. The youth ambassadors for Project Yanzon, a private trust dedicated to conservation in the Abel Tasman National Park, have played a key role in getting the kaka established, as 11-year-old Louis Berger explains.
Bark Bay is our adopt section site, so pretty much what we do is we come out and we're doing work on it and sort of helping restore it. So yeah, we're coming out today to help release the kaka, which is really cool.
This life jacket's located on the front. We're not required to wear one on any of our seashell vessels.
Sophie Maxwell, also a youth ambassador, says it's an important day for them.
We're really connected to the environment. We're in a enviro school, and I really love just the environment. I like being in the environment, and the kaka sort of symbolise that the national park is sort of getting better from an illness.
As we arrive at Medlands Beach, our drop-off point before a walk into Bark Bay, Project Yanzon director Bruce Vanderlee says today is a huge milestone.
7 years ago we set out to make the park safe for our native birds, and being able to put kaka onto the coast of the Abel Tasman is a realization of that vision.
Mr Vanderlee says the Trust has drawn on expertise within the Department of Conservation to help guide the project. He explains why the kaka is special.
They're an iconic New Zealand bird. Our vision has always been that people can walk along the coast of the Abel Tasman and see the amazing wildlife that New Zealand has to offer. They're loud, they're visible, they're playful. You know, they have a role to play in the forest in terms of the berries that they eat and the seeds that they disperse.
Wild kaka used to be seen in large numbers in the Abel Tasman. Introduced predators have devastated the park's wild population. Some of the birds released today were taken as eggs from wild nests last summer. Project Yanzon ornithologist Ron Morehouse was part of the team who helped retrieve them. And if that sounds easy, it wasn't. Mr Morehouse says checking a nesting female kaka was quite the mission.
And we went to the nest. We were going to climb up and see what was in it, and then we discovered there was an active bee's nest in the tree. So I decided that discretion was probably a better part of valour, and we came back the next day armed with a bee suit.
A bee suit?
A bee suit, yeah. So I climbed the tree in a bee suit.
The manu were blessed by local iwi before being released. After a hesitant step outside the aviary, they were soon free and singing from the trees. The Department of Conservation, Abel Tasman Birdsong Trust and Air New Zealand have combined to help reduce predators to low numbers, with more than 90% of the park now stoat-trapped. Aerial predator control is carried out when needed. Author and Project Yanzon trustee Philip Simpson says it's a significant day.
Just absolutely massive amount of work by DOC
and the Yanzon team, and the Kaka really is the sort of the pinnacle of the species here, because they were undoubtedly going to become extinct.
Visitors to the park this summer might be lucky enough to see one, but a word from the experts is, please don't feed them. It's bad for their health and might even be fatal. In Kaiteriteri for Checkpoint, Tracy Neal.
Some quick feedback now before the news on the Royal Commission of Abuse Inquiry controversy. Tony's got in touch to say, what a ridiculous question. Of course the pedo shouldn't be anywhere near the panel. I did several years for smuggling pot and being around all kinds of pedophiles. They are unfixable, says Tony. But this one, on the other hand, it would be terribly unfair to punish my wife for something I had done. New Zealanders are proud of their capacity for righteous indignation. On the Spark phone scammers, or those posing as Spark scammers, this person says they kept them on the line for 90 minutes, telling them they had to go downstairs to get a laptop. There was someone at the door, and just before they got him to key in the TeamViewer code, which would have given them access to his PC and potentially his bank account, I told them I had been in IT for 40 years and was just stringing them along. He says, they told me to F off and hung up. I got a childish kick out of it, says Derek. I got a childish kick out of that story too, Derek. Hey, thanks for getting in touch. After the 6 o'clock news, we will have more on the abuse inquiry. We're getting a lot of feedback on this. This person says the minister should go nowhere near the commission. She needs to take advice urgently. If she deals with them directly, the Commission is tainted with ministerial involvement forever. That's Tracy Martin, who's planning to have a meeting tomorrow afternoon with members of the Commission, and she's been getting advice on what her legal powers are. Roger's also been in touch and says surely any self-respecting commissioner would just resign. Why they don't is not clear.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui, ko Susana Leata with DNA. The Minister in charge of the Royal Commission of Inquiry into Abuse and Care says her confidence in its leadership has been shaken. It emerged this morning that a convicted sex offender was allowed to be involved in some Commission meetings. The Commission admits it made mistakes over the involvement of the offender, who is the partner of one of the Survivors Advisory Group members. The Minister of Internal Affairs, Tracy Martin, is seeking legal advice, and she hopes to meet with the Commission tomorrow.
I need to hear from them specifically. How did this come about? What actions did they take? How are they going to rebuild confidence? I need to hear from them specifically.
Tracy Martin told Parliament earlier this afternoon that she has no role in how the Commission operates because it is independent. The second round of gun law reform that will introduce a firearms register and new penalties has passed its first reading. However, National, ACT and Independent MP Jamie Lee Ross all voted against the bill. Police Minister Stuart Nash told the House that not all tragedies personally affect MPs, but events like the March 15th terror attack haunts politicians. He says there's no better illustration of this than former Police Minister John Banks and the Aramoana massacre.
He told a reporter, and I quote, "Since Christchurch, I haven't been able to get out of my mind a small boy aged about 8 lying dead on the ground with his eyes wide open and the look of fear I have never forgotten. That young boy has haunted me these last couple of weeks. This is the greatest disappointment of my political life. Not having the numbers to rid this country of these killing machines."
Stuart Nash says he doesn't want to be that minister in 20 years' time, expressing his regret that the gun lobby won out. And $45 million has now been paid out in the firearms buyback. The scheme was put in place to allow people to hand in guns that had become illegal after the Christchurch mosque shootings. The police say 15,000 gun owners have handed in 24,000 guns, as well as 88,000 parts and accessories. 68% of the guns handed in so far are semi-automatic rifles. The police have warned that prohibited firearms have to be handed over before December the 20th. A young woman who attended the memorial service for the late Tongan Prime Minister Akilisi Pohiva in Auckland has been diagnosed with measles. The Auckland Regional Public Health Service is asking everyone who attended the service at the Tuinga Papai Free Wesleyan Church in the suburb of Favona to be on the alert for the disease. Jessie Chang reports.
The Ministry of Health in New Zealand has advised their counterparts in Tonga of the situation. The Auckland Regional Public Health Service says it is providing advice on who may have been exposed to the measles virus at the gathering on the 15th of September. It says everyone who attended should be vigilant for symptoms of high fever, runny nose, cough and sore eyes from today. Medical Officer of Health Dr William Ranger says there are now more than 1,200 cases of measles in Auckland, with nearly 50% of them occurring in Pacific communities in the region. Kōresi Chang tēnei.
The All Black, Sonny Bill Williams, has questioned why the social media platform Instagram removed a photo of him and New Zealand prop Ofa Tu'ungafasi performing a Muslim prayer. The photo was taken before New Zealand's match against the Springboks at the Rugby World Cup. In a Twitter post, Williams asked why the photo was removed from both players' accounts. He says it was a simple picture of someone expressing gratitude for what they've been blessed with. Williams took a screenshot of Instagram's message about the post. It read, "We've removed or disabled access to content that you posted to Instagram because a third party reported that the content infringes or otherwise violates their rights." Williams converted to Islam in 2008. School principals are pleased where the government is moving to replace the decile funding system by 2022. The government says it will introduce a new index based on data about individual children in each school to allocate equity funding from 2021 or 2022. Tom Webb from Decile 1 Māngere College says getting rid of decile numbers will be a big improvement.
A lot of people feel that a decile number gives an indication of the quality of the education you receive in a school, which is clearly not the case. It's about the socio-economic background of the students. So removing that label from schools, I think, will be a really big advantage, and particularly for low decile schools that have had that stigma placed on them in the past.
Tom Webb has also welcomed the government's plan to increase equity funding from its current total of $150 million a year. A resident of Ashurst is breathing a sigh of relief knowing his residential street might return to normal after 3 years of being State Highway 1. This morning, the Transport Minister Phil Twyford confirmed funding for the new Manawatu Gorge after reallocating funds earmarked for Auckland's light rail project. The road is now expected to start early next year and be completed by 2024 at a cost of $620 million. Grant Marshall lives on Salisbury Street, the road that 6,000 vehicles a day drive through to reach the alternate route. He says the new road will make a big difference to the community.
Having that quiet rural feel to the Ashurst village will be good again, not having to worry about truck and trailers coming through at 3 a.m. with using the engine brake. Getting that peace and sanctuary back, I think it's going to be quite good, and obviously it'll just let people be able to move on from all the disruption they've had.
Grant Marshall says it's nice to see money move from Auckland to the regions. It's 6 minutes past 6. Samoa kick off their Rugby World Cup tournament tonight in Japan when they meet Russia. Russia lost their tournament opener against hosts Japan on Friday night. Samoa are determined to go beyond the World Cup pool stages for the first time in over 20 years, with coach Steve Jackson challenging his players to create their own legacy to match the Samoan quarter-finalists of 1991 and 1995. To make the last 8, Samoa will have to beat Japan and Scotland too. The Silver Ferns coach Nolene Dorua says they desperately need to build greater depth in the attacking circle if they are to kick on from their Netball World Cup success. New Zealand's squad for their next assignment against Australia, the Constellation Cup, was named yesterday, with shooter Maya Wilson added as the 13th player for the Australian leg of the competition. Dorua says while they have good depth in defence and on mid-court, she's conscious that veteran Maria Folau may not be around for much longer. The Constellation Cup starts in Christchurch on October 13th and will be the Silver Ferns' first match since their World Cup success. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, a window on the world of flying without a carbon footprint and other oxymorons. Although the Norwegians are working to change that, Trevor Reiki talks to Ngā Taonga Puoro artist Alistair Fraser about his latest album, which mixes music with the songs of marine mammals. And our native fish geek, Stella McQueen, discusses colder or freshwater crayfish. Detritus is their specialty. On Nights of me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, occasional rain, clearing from the south tonight. A few spots returning tomorrow afternoon. Wairarapa and Wellington, cloudy periods, possible showers today. A few showers developing tomorrow afternoon, mainly in Wairarapa, with possible thunderstorms there tomorrow night. For the remainder of the North Island, rain, heavy falls, possible thunderstorms, snow lowering to 600 metres over central high country tomorrow evening. For Marlborough, Canterbury, Otago, excluding Clutha, cloudy periods with isolated showers spreading north tomorrow, some heavy with hail, possible thunderstorms, snow lowering to 300 metres in Otago and to 500 metres elsewhere. For Nelson, Westland and Bulla, dry in Nelson, scattered showers elsewhere, showers spreading everywhere tomorrow with heavy showers, hail, possible thunderstorms and snow lowering to 500 metres. Fiordland, Southland and Clutha, showers, some heavy with hail and possible thunderstorms, snow lowering to 100 metres later tomorrow. And Chatham Islands, rain with heavy falls, easing to a few showers tomorrow. RNZ National coming up to 6:09.
Thank you, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. An abuse survivor says heads need to roll if trust is to be restored in the Royal Commission of Inquiry into Abuse in Care. The minister responsible for the inquiry, Tracy Martin, is demanding answers after it emerged today that the partner and support person of one of the Commission's Survivor Advisory Group members is a convicted paedophile. And the man had been in meetings with survivors who were oblivious to his criminal record. Tyrone Marks is on the survivors panel for the Royal Commission of Inquiry. He says learning a paedophile was among them has destroyed all trust.
I've got a group of people here that have just been re-traumatised again. So, yeah, it's very concerning.
What would you like to see happen?
I'd like to see heads roll because of this. To have a paedophile amongst us when we have a, what are we here for? Abuse, sexual abuse, and a number of other things. So, it's taken quite a few people back. The Commission are in, again, damage control. When you say heads should roll, whose head? I'm talking senior management. I'm talking in chief executive level.
Move Singham?
Yeah, well, he's the actual chief executive. So, I think his head should roll. I think Paul Gibson should go as well.
When did you find out?
Well, put it this way, I got some intel around just under 2 weeks ago. But I can't tell you who that was from. But what I can tell you, it come from within the Commission.
And that intel, as you put it, was that explicit about the serious nature of the charges this person was convicted of? Were you told that this person was a child rapist?
We were told that he was a paedophile.
Do you have confidence at all in this inquiry now?
Not at the moment, no, not at all. There's been, too many things that have happened here, and and this is the icing on the cake as far as I'm concerned, and the others. Some of it. It's not. I can't speak for every single person on that panel, but rest assured, there's at least the ones that I have spoken to are of the same opinion. The survivors out there have lost confidence and trust that that their safety is going to be looked after, and what's just happened here is a clear indication that they've let others slip between the lines and have done nothing about it. Could have avoided it. As far as vetting goes, well, when you vet in any job, you should be doing that on the very beginning. You should be doing it, So maybe if they had done that, you see, the person that we're talking about isn't actually a member. So he's a support person for his wife, for his partner. and so he's not actually a panel member, but he's been in 3 of these meetings to date.
Okay, so Tyrone, there's conflicting information about that, so I want you to talk me through it. This person, were they in the room with the survivors group? What interactions were had with him?
Well, he has been in 3 of these meetings. The first is back in June, I think, when we had our first meeting, which was counselled in terms of some people couldn't make it from the South Island to the north, but he was sitting in that one.
So inside a room with survivors. He was in the room with survivors.
Inside the room with survivors, yep.
And then on the other occasions?
Back again in Wellington, the same thing. He was sitting in with his partner on that meeting as well. On the last one, which is August, he was also in that too, up until one of the members had told him that he can't be in there any longer. I'm not sure why.
What do you think of the fact that he was right there in those meetings? How do you feel about that?
I'm feeling quite bad, that he was allowed to be able to do this. And I feel I'm quite taken back for my other members because, we've got both female and male members there that have been sexually abused as children. And then now having someone like that amongst the other survivors, has caused, like I said, has gone even to re-traumatising people again. And lucky I'm a counsellor and social worker as well, so I've been able to sort of, to talk with them. That's what we're doing at the moment. But certainly the trust has gone out the door. And they're counselling this meeting. It was meant to be today and tomorrow, but they're counselling. It hasn't really told us why, but I expect it's because they're in damage control.
To restore your faith, do those people who you mentioned need to go?
I reckon, yep. But then what do you do? Who replaces them? That's the crossroads where we are too. Who do we replace them with?
And that's Tyrone Marks, who's on the Survivors Advisory Group. The government's given the green light for a new highway to replace the Manawatu Gorge Road. The Gorge Road, which had been one of the main routes between the west and east coast of the lower North Island, has been closed since 2017 because of multiple slips. Today, Transport Minister Phil Twyford unveiled plans to spend $620 million on a new road, much to the relief of many in the region. Charlotte Cook reports.
News of the replacement highway couldn't have come soon enough for residents and businesses on Ashurst's Salisbury Street. Since the Manawatu Gorge Road closed more than 2 years ago, residents in the normally quiet street have had to contend with noisy trucks as it became the main thoroughfare to Woodville. It's estimated 6,000 vehicles drive through every day. But the announcement of more funding and a start date for a replacement highway has given locals some hope that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. One resident, Grant Marshall, says it's nice to see the government take some money out of Auckland and spend it in the regions. He says the new road will make a big difference.
Having that quiet rural feel to the Ashurst village will be good again, not having to worry about truck and trailers coming through at 3 a.m. with using the engine brake. Getting that peace and sanctuary back, I think it's going to be quite good, and obviously it'll just let people be able to move on from all the disruption they've had.
Grant Marshall says construction of the road will also bring much-needed jobs to the village, and local businesses are preparing for the influx. Associate Transport Minister Julianne Genter says the replacement road is a critical connection linking Palmerston North to northern Wairarapa.
I think it's fantastic that finally we're going to get this critical transport link back for that region. The previous government had not funded it, but our government will fund it, and I think it's going to really benefit those communities.
Depending on resource consents, enabling works are expected to begin this year and full construction was expected to get underway next year. The proposed road would start near the western entry of the original State Highway 3 Gorge route, crossing the Ruahine Range north of the gorge and reconnecting to State Highway 3 at Woodville. Tararua Mayor Tracy Collis says today's announcement removes the uncertainty around the project for both locals and businesses.
People haven't seen a spade in the ground yet. You know, there's been a lot of planning going into this, a lot of consultation, but no physical spade in the ground. So until that happens, you always have that little bit of uncertainty there. But now with that commitment from the Minister, people will be able to start planning for the growth.
Palmerston North Mayor Grant Smith says it's been a tale of two villages.
Woodville desperately wants the traffic to go through it, whereas Ashurst desperately doesn't want it to go through the state highway traffic to go through it. So they've put up, and will have to put up for a few more years of this state highway traffic. But the residents of Ashurst are very resilient and have learnt to cope with it reasonably well with some mitigation measures in place. But look, we'll be very happy when that final road is open.
Grant Smith says there are a few appeals to be worked through before the road can go ahead, but they are close to an agreement. For Checkpoint, Charlotte Cook.
It's almost 19 after 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. The next stage of gun law reform, which will introduce a firearms register and new penalties, has passed its first reading. In April, a law banning military-style semi-automatic weapons and parts passed with near unanimous support in the wake of the March 15 Christchurch mosque attacks, where 51 people died. The National Party joined forces with the government back then. However, Parliament is once again divided on the second tranche, with the opposition pulling its support. Our political reporter Joe Moyer watched the debate.
The Police Minister Stuart Nash opened the debate saying not all tragedies personally affect MPs, but the March 15 attacks haunt politicians. He says that's because when MPs move on from politics, they're inevitably asked about the high points, the low points, and their regrets. In the case of the Christchurch attack, Mr Nash says there is no better illustration of how severe the haunting is than the words of former Police Minister John Banks.
When the former minister heard of the shootings at the mosques, a terrible image came back to him. He was instantly at Aramoana in 1990, walking amongst the dead, the 13 men, women and children who lost their lives in another mass shooting. He told a reporter, and I quote, "Since Christchurch, I haven't been able to get out of my mind a small boy aged about 8, lying dead on the ground, with his eyes wide open and the look of fear I have never forgotten. That young boy has haunted me these last couple of weeks. This is the greatest disappointment of my political life, not having the numbers to rid this country of these killing machines."
The change is set to come into force with the support of the coalition government, include a gun register to store information on all firearms. Within 2 years, Mr Nash says the government will be able to track and trace all licence holders and their firearms through the register. New offences and penalties are also being introduced. For example, increasing the maximum penalty for possessing a firearm without a licence from the current $1,000 and or 3 months imprisonment to a maximum penalty of $15,000 or 1 year imprisonment. The ACT leader David Seymour was the sole dissenting voice in the first tranche of legislation, and his criticism continued today.
And I remain genuinely puzzled that the Prime Minister, who speaks the language of kindness and inclusion, chose to follow a process that was so rushed and so improper and so accusatory of a group of law-abiding New Zealanders, it would make Robert Muldoon blush. But she did it. And now this government is doing it again.
National has joined ACT in opposition the second time round, and its police spokesperson Brett Hudson says that's because the bill isn't targeting who it was meant to.
It isn't focused on criminals at all, Madam Speaker. In fact, it has it, in our view, 180 degrees the wrong way around. Instead, the bill is imposing greater regulation, more responsibilities and more costs on law-abiding New Zealanders who happen to own firearms, and is doing very little of any substance to address genuine criminal activity and particularly gangs.
The gun buyback scheme is currently underway across the country. As of last night, more than 24,000 firearms and 89,000 parts have been handed in, and compensation payments worth around $46 million have been processed. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Joe Moyer.
Up to 21 people are reported dead after ongoing violence in Indonesia's remote Papua province as security forces clamp down on more student mobilisations. About 16 people died in the town of Wamena, either in burning buildings or being shot by authorities. Alex Perrottet with this report.
Government buildings and public facilities on fire in the remote highlands city of Wamena. Huge plumes of black smoke rise up from the city where hordes of high school students had taken to the streets in protest at an alleged racist slur from a teacher. The Jakarta Globe reports up to 16 people died after being trapped in burning buildings set alight by rioters. This reports hundreds of students gathered at Cendrawasih University Auditorium, which had been serving as a temporary shelter for students fleeing cities across the country as a result of racial abuse. Police and military personnel besieged the university and a violent struggle ensued. There's reports some students turned violent against the authorities. Firearms were used to disperse the crowd. Veronica Coman, who provided images of the burning buildings, says students were running around the streets to avoid getting shot. She fled to a nearby church, while others took shelter at the police headquarters. The violence is not the first time students have been shot by authorities in Papua, where calls for independence have been met with violent backlash from police and military. Yoab Siatle is an independence campaigner and says he's just returned from the United Nations in New York, where he was lobbying for it to recognise West Papua's efforts towards self-determination.
We want that the United Nations has to grant West Papua membership or to put West Papua back to the agenda this year.
He says the people of West Papua have already voted for their own independent government in 2011, but Indonesia treated that as treason and arrested the elected leader.
100% we control of West Papua throughout the entire end of West Papua. So we are state, we are not organization.
The unrest has forced Wamena Airport to halt its operations. It typically sees 120 flights a day. Late last week, the Indonesian military reported 3 civilians, including a 3-year-old boy, died in a shootout with rebels in West Papua. The police and the West Papua government have again blamed the separatist groups for stirring the violence and encouraging the rebels, while the military is accused of human rights abuses in the province. For Checkpoint, Alex Perrottet.
And additional reporting there from RNZ Pacific's Johnny Blades. It's set to be the biggest single event in Australasian combat sports history when UFC 243 takes place in Melbourne next Sunday. No less than 4 New Zealanders will compete in front of a worldwide audience of millions. 3 of those mixed martial artists come from the same Auckland gym, including Israel Adesanya, who is challenging for the world middleweight title in the event's headline bout. Clay Wilson and camera operator Dan Cook caught up with the 4 Kiwis ready to make a statement on Australian soil.
Israel, the last style bender! Well before his UFC debut 18 months ago, Israel Adesanya predicted he would fight Kiwi-born Australian Robert Whittaker for the world middleweight title in 2019. But, sharp as he is inside and outside the cage, he probably didn't foresee the circumstances in which that bout for the belt would come. Adesanya will be joined by City kickboxing teammates Dan Hooker and Brad Riddell, as well as Hamilton's Luke Jameau at UFC 243. It means the dressing rooms at the 60,000 capacity Marvel Stadium will be swarming with Kiwis, and Adesanya says there's no doubt that makes a difference.
In the cage it doesn't, but when we're together as a squad, rolling together as a unit, it does, because it feels like we're storming their land and taking over. So it does, it's like there's a pride thing, like a prideful thing, but it's not even like a nationalist thing, it's just a mana thing.
The heavy New Zealand involvement is especially good news for Riddell. The 27-year-old, whose stellar kickboxing resume has helped him earn his UFC debut, says Melbourne won't feel like enemy territory at all.
It's going to feel like I'm here. It's going to feel like I'm here warming up or training, and I'm just going to go out there and I'm going to hear just as many people from my gym. We've got like 200 people going over there and they're all sat in one area. So it's going to be like home. That
relaxed Kiwi vibe will also be welcomed by Hooker, with the last 5 of his 13 UFC bouts coming in the US. And while he gets a big opportunity in the co-main event alongside the world's 6th-ranked lightweight, highly respected American Al Iaquinta, Hooker is also more than happy to take a back seat to Adesanya ahead of next Sunday.
I like it. I like it when Israel's on the card because then he gets asked all the questions and I can kind of just fly under the radar and get to the fight, which is the part I like.
A statement victory could also open doors for Jamo in the welterweight division. Although he spends his weekends in Auckland and is close with the city kickboxing crew, the 31-year-old says he's more than happy in Hamilton for now.
Auckland's pretty expensive place to live in too, you know what I mean? And it's a pretty big city. But man, Hamilton's where it's at too. We've got some real good talent down there.
Jamo says that talent is, in part, a product of the increasing success being experienced by New Zealand's top mixed martial artists.
It's blowing up and it's real good, get these guys off the streets and putting their energies into something positive and having all these guys as role models, and we come from the same place, same areas, you know what I mean? It's super motivating for these kids, and I know that.
Motivation isn't an issue for Adesanya, with the potential to get a shiny gold belt to match his shiny gold chains. Never short of confidence, the Nigerian-born 30-year-old has a message for those saying he's not ready to be a world champion just yet.
So everyone every time, it's too soon, he's not ready, and I prove them wrong and I prove myself right every single time. This will be no different.
Just taking part definitely won't be enough. But, as Hooker explains, whichever way results fall, it's going to be an afternoon to remember.
To have the biggest event in UFC history to take place in Australia, in Melbourne, and to have all these Kiwis representing and flying the flag in front of the world, the world size. It's not just those 60,000 people there. That's an incredible feat in itself, but all the people that will be tuning in at home.
Moti hotaka o tia hipo nei, ko Clay Wilson aho.
Hey Kona, we'll catch you again tomorrow.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Minister Tracy Martin hopes to meet with commissioners tomorrow over news a convicted pedophile attended meetings of the inquiry into abuse in care. The second round of gun law reform has passed its first reading. National Acton Jamie Lee Ross voted against it. People at a memorial service for the late Tongan Prime Minister in Auckland last week are advised to be alert after a young woman who attended was diagnosed with measles. And All Black Sonny Bill Williams wants to know why Instagram removed a photo of him and prop Ofa Tuangafasi performing a Muslim prayer. Those are the headlines. Our next news at 7.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
It has nothing to do with his cricketing career at all, and as I said, it occurred before he was born, so very difficult to justify as a public interest story.
Lately with me, Karen Hayes, your late night eye on the latest headlines and the people who are making them.
There's no scientific evidence for the notion of repressed memory at this